Okay, this video continues the topic that was our first introduction following a lot of feedback and a meta-analysis from imcorne.org, and of course one of the first and foremost omissive element that this topic is about algorithms. For example, terms like sovereignty, which is not in a Bible language, and free will, which is not these aren't original Bible languages, of course. For example, the Corne text, for example, mentions a word boule, which you don't need to write that in Greek, and then thelema, and these are this is referring to things that are determined. These are things that God determines, and this refers to desires. And a great Bible study for those who wish to support the text rather than try to use information to support constructs, which is not the purpose of the Bible. I think that makes the Bible merely a proof text. There's not an algorithm when someone comes along and just arbitrarily equates these two terms, and in doing that, then your study's over. You basically, then everything's just determination, and this idea of desire is no longer. But there's not an algorithm in any rational field of study. You have an algorithm, a procedure, an order. For example, there is a hermeneutic that will lead you to understand the Bible and the words and what they mean in their particular context. And then there's hermeneutics out there that are skewed to support a construct, A, B, or C, or whatever someone prefers, similar to the lack of an algorithm when it comes to this notion. Of course, you know there are constructs, a libertarian version, which we've talked about that before, a compatibilistic version, which are built offline. They're supported by Scripture, but they are not this meaning. There's not an algorithm. This is arbitrary. You just somewhat pick one, which I've always been curious which one someone thinks they might have exercised when they haven't any knowledge of which one it is. But if you were to go to the text itself, we know that there's an aspect in the Bible itself, and it's in the Hebrew language, of course, very clearly there, in two stems, the hifil and the hafal, which are this information is very concise and succinct. There's a perfect and imperfect state in Hebrew. These two stems appear in both those states. This is a causative, active. This one's causative, passive. So when you hear in philosophy people discussing agent causation, that's in a field of philosophy, but they don't necessarily go back and say, well, that's actually an aspect of Hebrew. Now, Hebrew would function in these grammars and these different stems and these aspects of that language. That would be for someone who wants to practice a missionary Baptist apologetic, for example. That would take care of this that would otherwise be missing. And then to include the Bible words as they actually appear, so that you could have a greater understanding in the particular context of things God desires and things God determines, which are distinguished in Scripture. Then you can actually know that you are following a rationale, the reason that is actually embedded within the language, that is the text itself. So the number one omissive element would be algorithms, and we'll do another one in a moment, text, and give an example of what can happen when you don't have an algorithm, just as what's happened with sovereignty and what's happened with this phrase. A lot of people have really had some, let's just say, negative things to say about each other, arguing whether or not the Bible teaches one or the other or both, but never necessarily explaining from the Bible, according to an algorithm, what are the implications of these statements. So that's enough. Try to keep these as brief as possible so you can review these and go look this up yourself.